Well, folks, we got a bunch of Switch 2 news to bring you today, including some sales data here from the U.S. because we have some early data coming in from Circana. We also have some details on Amazon and Nintendo looking like they might have ended their feud in the United States. That's always good for consumers as well. Some additional ways to actually get games and some other Nintendo things cheaper at a certain retailer in the US, which might be even more relevant this generation with prices of games going up. And we got to go over this story about Age of Imprisonment because there's a brand new interview posted in Japan that just details a lot of stuff behind the development of the game. And it is one of the big exclusive games coming to Switch 2 here, we assume in the next 6 months, maybe even as soon as December. So before we dive in, I just want to remind you, we are giving away 5 copies of Donkey Kong Bonanza. In order to enter to win, all you got to do is go down to the link in the pinned comment or the description. I wish everyone luck, and let's go ahead and dive in first with this information coming from Matt Piscatella, who works at Circana. So he's over here on Blue Sky, and he says, Nintendo Switch 2 set a new all-time launch week unit sales record for video game hardware in the U.S. with over 1.1 million units sold during the week ending June 7, 2025, and this excludes sales from the My Nintendo Store. So they do not have the My Nintendo Store numbers, which would obviously make that be even higher. The record was previously held by PlayStation 4. So look, not only did Nintendo break all-time sales records in Japan, they're breaking all-time sales records here in the US for a launch weekend. That is absolutely insane. Obviously, we don't have the full month details. That'll be, well, the month isn't over yet, right? So that'll be in July that we'll get the full month details. But Circana already providing that sales data is incredible. And again, doesn't include My Nintendo Store. There's like a projection out there of like 1.3 million, 1.4 million if you include the My Nintendo Store sales as well. Of course, we don't know what the sales data is. That's on Nintendo. We do know worldwide it sold over 3.5 million. We don't know how much over during that 4-day period. So we'll have to wait and see. But obviously, the full month data is going to be really telling. There's a lot of predictions out there that it's going to be at like 5 or 6 million before we even get to the end of June, which would also be another all-time record for that time period. So we'll see if Switch 2 continues to break sales records for the rest of this year. Now, I got to talk about a thing that's really, really positive that's going on right now, and that is Nintendo and Amazon. For those who don't know, over the last year, and even when they mended things, there was another time period like 2 or 3 years ago, Nintendo of America and the United States branch of Amazon have been having a feud. We don't exactly know what the feud is about or what is going on, but we do know that no, Amazon did not sell Nintendo Switch 2, nor was it selling any of the amiibo, the official accessories, or the games. They weren't selling any of this stuff, at least Nintendo's games, on their website for Switch 2. They just weren't. There was a disagreement, and all that console allotment ended up going to other retailers. Well, it looks like that is coming to an end. We have this article over here on Nintendo Everything saying Nintendo and Amazon end their feud. First-party Switch 2 games and more are now available. And it says, another long standoff between Nintendo and Amazon. The two sides are finally working together once again. For whatever reason, over the past year or so, it has been impossible to purchase anything sold directly by Nintendo, at least if you're in the United States. That means the Switch 2 console itself, recently released, and upcoming titles like Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, and even new amiibo, were unavailable on Amazon. Neither side commented on the situation, leaving fans to wonder where they are. And thankfully now we can go to some Amazon listings and see this stuff is coming back up. So here we have Donkey Kong Bonanza, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Super Mario Jamboree. This is all sold directly by Nintendo. That's what we want to see. Again, we can't buy this stuff yet. We can't pre-order it yet, but it is becoming slowly available. And beyond all of that, we obviously have some amiibo popping up as well. Again, can't be purchased quite yet, but the listings are now up. And with the listings now up, that means that we can be excited about things coming back. Obviously, we don't have the console listed yet, but the point is, it looks like Nintendo and Amazon are starting to work together again. Nintendo is now setting up listings, and sales and pre-orders and all that stuff should be happening fairly soon. This is just good for people, especially that live in remote areas where Amazon's one of the few options they have that are reliably delivering to their area. Yeah. Look, this is good for consumers. I'm glad they have whatever the beef was sorted out. And now we can move on to what I think is maybe the biggest story of this whole thing, of a giant interview dealing with, well, Age of Imprisonment. They're not going to call it that, by the way, because this is a Japanese translation by Google Translate. But you'll understand what's going on here. So we're over here where it says Zelda Musou Chronicle of the Binding War, aka Age of Imprisonment, was developed by Koei Tecmo's AAA studio. We want to deliver a straightforward game like Seikisuke to the world. The Switch 2 specs have been upgraded, making the game much more fun. So the new hardware Switch 2 was released on June 5th, 2025. One of the various compatible software announced for it was Nintendo Direct, Switch 2, the Zelda Musou, Legend of the Binding War, aka Age of Imprisonment. This is the latest work of the Zelda Musou series, where you can enjoy the exhilaration of Koei Tecmo game Musou series in the world of Nintendo's Zelda series. The title depicts the battle of the War of the Binding War, or Age of Imprisonment, the Imprisoning War, a prequel to The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, with the actions of the Musou series scheduled for release this winter. When the video for this work was released, you did notice that an unfamiliar logo, AAA Game Studio, was displayed next to the Koei Tecmo game logo. This is the logo of Koei Tecmo Game Studio's new development studio, just called AAA Studio. Okay? AAA Games. See, it's right there. That did appear next to Koei Tecmo, but people didn't really pay any attention to it, but that is actually something that happened. So, the AAA Studio was actually established in April 2024 as a studio for developing AAA class games. Editor's note, a AAA is a term that refers to the games that are produced with a large development budget and manpower. Same thing applies to AAA titles. So hey, we kind of get like an industry definition of what AAA means apparently within the industry, and that is a high budget with lots of manpower. Of course, what the cutoff is for AA or AAA, I don't know if that is ever defined, but the name was mentioned on Koei Tecmo Games' official website and in financial statements, but no overt movement had been made until the announcement of obviously the new Age of Imprisonment game. Koei Tecmo Games has released various titles under 6 brands, including the Shibusaku, W-Force, Team Ninja, Gust, Ruby Party, and Midas. With the addition of AAA Studio, it has become a new structure of 6 brands plus 1 studio. Following the announcement, we spoke to studio head Hayashi Yosuke of Zelda Musou, Legend of the Binding War, aka Age of Imprisonment, producer Masashita Ryuto about the strategy of AAA Studio and development of new hardware. All right, now we get to the Switch 2, baby. Your debut title as AAA Studio will be Zelda Musou Legend of Annexes. We're talking about Age of Imprisonment here for the Nintendo Switch 2. How does it feel developing for the Nintendo Switch 2? Matsushita, in the previous game, Zelda Age of Calamity was a Nintendo Switch game. So I feel the specs have been upgraded in a very clear way. The machine's power has allowed us to expand the appeal of the sequel and get the impression that it's very easy to make a good game. Now, your previous title, Age of Calamity, was a spin-off of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and as a Musou title, it was necessary to thin out the graphics in order to draw a large number of characters at the same time. But this time, with the power of Switch 2, is it possible to display a large number of characters while drawing the characters from The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom almost exactly as they were? Matsushita, well, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was an open-air game. Zelda Musou, Age of Calamity, is a Musou title in which you have to defeat enemies and strong enemies, so the genres are different to begin with, and the way the hardware specification allocated is completely different. In that sense, although the specifications have been upgraded for Nintendo Switch 2 this time, we are not just bringing over The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom as it is, but using the hardware specifications to enjoy the unique appeal of this work, not only that there are many enemies, but also tense combat. Hayashi comes in and says, when this project first started, we were developing it as a Nintendo Switch game for a while. We changed to Nintendo Switch 2 midway through. And just by transferring what we have been creating up until then to Switch 2, the number of enemies that appeared and the frame rate changed dramatically. And the game simply became a lot more fun. We were also surprised at how much the game's fun could change thanks to the hardware. Matsushita says, I realized this feeling of comfort and excitement would be conveyed to customers, and at that moment, I was convinced that this would be a great product. Now, it seems that just changing the number of enemies that can appear and the frame rate can make such a difference without changing the gameplay. Hayashi says, when the number and frame rate change, the amount of information on the screen also increases. When we originally developed the game on Switch, we were running on a very limited number of specs, so by having more specs, it became more comfortable, and we could pack in more of the gameplay we were thinking of. The feeling when you play it is completely different. All right, in the video released at the Direct, you see scenes of Raul and Manel fighting in the underground world. That's Raru and stuff. But what are the points that have been powered up from the previous game. Matsushita says, in addition to the spec upgrades typical of Musou series, such as an increase in the number of enemies displayed, which I mentioned earlier, the point we kept in mind for the sequel is that it allows fans to play for a long time with ingenuity. The fun of The Legend of Zelda is the room for ingenuity, or the joy of trying something out and actually succeeding. But in Zelda Musou, which is a fighting game, it's not about solving puzzles on the field. But what about the attacks to use and how to defeat the enemy? This work has also been powered up in that respect. When a certain enemy appears, you could try out predictions, such as whether it would be advantageous to use an item you have, or whether it would be advantageous to use a skill of a character that you have befriended. And the game will respond to that prediction, and the depth of such elements has been increased. I see. I think The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has an extraordinary degree of freedom, but it seems like it would be very difficult to use it as a subject. Matsushita says, I think many users were shocked by the freedom and depth of Tears of the Kingdom. It's not possible to reproduce that kind of play exactly, but the game responds to your expectations and predictions, making you want to try something new. We're challenging ourselves to sublimate the essence of that kind of play into the Musou genre. I'm really looking forward to it. It says, I'd like to ask you about other new features. The Nintendo Switch 2 not only has the specs have been upgraded, but there are also new features such as game chat. What are your impressions? Matsushita, I think it fits the way gamers play today. The game chat that the console provides, including the play area, allows the group to smoothly transition to multiplayer on the Switch 2 title after work or school, which I thought was great. Hayashi says, I think the share play feature is very attractive. When everyone gathers in the living room with the Nintendo Switch, there are situations where everyone plays on the Nintendo Switch connected to the TV, while one person plays a different game in handheld mode in the same living room. However, with share play, a group playing on the TV and a person playing in handheld mode can play the same game. Moreover, the fact that this can be achieved with just one game software means that the barriers are gone and everyone can play while talking in the living room, which I think is very Nintendo-like image of a game console. I think that when Nintendo Switch 2 actually arrives in the living room, everyone will be surprised when they see the share play feature and say, wow, you can do this. I'm looking forward to that aspect as well. Now, you mentioned earlier the specs have clearly been upgraded compared to Switch, but has that made it easier for you as a developer? Matsushita, that's right. I was moved to be able to experience the changes in hardware. However, developer desires never stop, and the specs have increased. A new challenge has begun. How much appeal can we create by setting higher hurdles? Now, it's an eternal theme. As a AAA studio, are there other projects in progress besides this game? Yes, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are working on multiple titles with the theme of providing new value and connecting the flow of the game, and the staff, including myself, have been in charge. So yes, they are making other games. There's a couple other questions in here they go on to. If you want to go way up, there's like a whole thing about how the studio was created and they, how they want to set that expectation and get a brand. And look, guys, it's an excellent interview. You guys should definitely go check it all out if you want to hear more about the team behind everything. And our last story deals with something that, I didn't pay much attention to last generation of Nintendo because bottom line is I did not have one of these stores near me until a year ago. We're talking about how to get games cheap, and we're talking about Costco. If you're a Costco member, you probably already know this. I'm a Costco member and didn't realize this was a thing because, again, only at a Costco around me the last year. Yeah, things are just cheaper. Look, Donkey Kong Bonanza, $62.99. Look at this. A digital version of Mario Kart World, $69.99 instead of $79.99. Same thing for Tears of the Kingdom. 10% off or more is apparently very common when you are a Costco member for Nintendo game products. I am going to be taking advantage of this myself. I don't know if you will be, but I hope you consider it. That being said, folks, I am Nathaniel Rufflejans from Nintendo Prime. Didn't realize we would be talking about Age of Imprisonment today. I'm always excited. I always get a little jittery when we talk about some Zelda stuff. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next video.